Said. Okay, good evening and welcome to this evening's Environmental Justice Committee meeting of ANC3C here on September 12th, 2023. Our guest tonight is Jamie Donovan from DOEE, who is going to give us a presentation on the district's Clean Energy 2.0 plan and the state of play with that. That's all we have on the agenda for tonight. So we'll listen to the presentation and take questions if there are any from the committee members and members of the public. So with that, I'll hand things over to Jamie.
Well, thank you, Rourke, and thank you for having me. I'm happy to speak tonight about our Clean Energy DC plan, which is the city's climate action and energy plan, which we're in the process of developing. But I'm also happy to try to take any questions about any other environmental programs that DOE has, or if you have any questions about any of the federal money that's going to be coming through DOE. I may not be able to answer your question, but I can at least take it and connect you with the right person if I can't answer it. I think I'll share my screen if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
And feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions or the slides aren't working and there's any issues. What I'll do is I'll go through the first half and then I'll stop and we can chat. And then I'll go through the rest of the presentation and then I can answer any additional questions. So let's start with a little context. The district has pretty ambitious climate goals, as you may or may not know. Our original goals that we've been tracking are on the left, a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2032, and achieving that through energy efficiency and more renewable energy. But the Climate Change Commitment Act enhanced those. So now we have the goal of being a carbon neutral city by 2045. And so that essentially means we have 22 years to eliminate all of our greenhouse gas emissions, which overwhelmingly come from fossil fuels. And that really is a transformation in how our whole economy works and how we power transportation, our buildings, and everything else. This is just a breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions. And so on the left, it shows what sectors our emissions come from. So buildings are primary driver of emissions, and that's energy use associated with buildings. So heating, cooling, are the primary ones, but also any electronics you have, water heating, other things like that. And followed by transportation, which is just a little less than a quarter. And then on the right, it breaks it down by energy use. So you can see electricity is the majority of our emissions by 53%, so just over half. So that's electricity we get from the grid, natural gas plants in other states that are importing or they're exporting. We're importing our electricity, followed by natural gas. So most of this is moved through pipes underground, mainly for space heating, and followed by water heating. And then finally, 19%, that's gasoline. So that's single occupancy vehicles, light duty trucks, that kind of thing. So I always think that's just useful to understand, okay, which sectors are you focusing on, why? And the district's a little different than the national average because we have more buildings and less transportation. So I have a few slides on why we need this plan, and I'll go over these, and I think in the equity, environmental justice, they're particularly important. And I can also talk a little bit about how the plan will relate to this. So we're already seeing the impacts of climate change in DC through a number of ways, more flooding, hotter days, and we expect these to continue. So reducing our emissions will help this. And one of the things we're going to do as part of Clean Energy DC is we're going to map a lot of the different data sets we have that can help guide our programs and investments. So we'll use a EPA tool that shows environmental justice communities by census tract, and then we can overlay things like heat island effect or where we're seeing more flooding, and then that can help us steer our investments. So let's say we want to do home weatherization or help our residents get air conditioning, more efficient air conditioning. Maybe an extra layer then that shows where it's hottest can help us reach those communities and protect them. Public health is another one. We've seen that in a lot of our communities in DC that have highways through them or environmental justice communities where there's been a legacy of pollution or where we've just concentrated our environmental waste. So it could just be in the form of pollution. There's higher asthma rates. And so that's the map on the left. And so the darker green is where we see more pediatric asthma emergency room visits. And then the red dots are life expectancy with the bigger the dot, the greater the life expectancy. And so this is another tool we could sort of layer on a map and say, okay, well, these areas, there's a lot of asthma. Maybe we should make investments in this community to improve the air quality by taking cars off the road or installing efficient heat pumps that have greater air cleaning properties. But we also see indoor air quality is associated with fossil fuel combustion. So, if you use gas to cook and you don't have a well-ventilated kitchen or you have a very small kitchen, this can really exacerbate respiratory problems, including asthma in children. We need a plan that deals with our infrastructure. So most of the infrastructure in the country is aging, and this has a lot of impacts on our future and trying to reduce our emissions. So the map on the left shows leaks from natural gas infrastructure. So those blue areas are high methane leaks. So, methane is a very potent greenhouse gas that causes climate change faster than a lot of the other greenhouse gas emissions. It's also bad for the environment, bad for people, but we have to address it. And the question is, do we want to build out for billions of dollars new gas infrastructure, which we're currently doing, or do we want to take a step back and say, okay, hey, if we're planning to use electric heat pumps and electric stoves and other electric appliances, is there a better way to do this? Do we go and electrify a whole neighborhood and reduce the need for the gas infrastructure? And so this is the kind of thing that can also be layered on an environmental justice tool to help us identify where our investments should go. At the same time, our grid will take more and more electric end uses. So your electric heating and cooling, your electric vehicle, our electric buses, and we need to make smarter and more focused investments in our electric grid so that it can accommodate this. We also need more local, clean and affordable energy. So DOE, we have quite a few programs that help residents address their energy burden, and a lot of residents' energy is not affordable or takes a lot of their monthly paycheck. And so we have bill assistance programs and other programs. We also have something called Solar for All. So for low-income residents can sign up for one of our solar installations, which are on the map there, and can subscribe to our solar program. And so they get the benefits of getting solar without needing a roof, or if they're a renter, they can still access it. And it reduces their annual electric costs by about $500 per subscriber. And then on the bottom in that blue table, this is market rate solar, also a great deal if you have a roof and you're interested in solar. It's generally a great investment if your roof accommodates it. And finally, the economy and jobs. We see the clean energy sector as a growth sector in DC. Um, we already have 1,500 solar jobs and over 11,000 energy efficiency jobs. So, but as we shift to even more clean technology, green industry, we need to ask ourselves, well, how can we get more residents involved in this? How can we get residents in the environmental justice communities? Can they actually benefit not just from improved air quality, but can they see a career out of this? And so this is something that we're looking at and trying to find solutions for. So that is the first part of the slide, and I'll just summarize some of what I was saying about Clean Energy DC2 is so we plan on creating this tool with our environmental justice communities on there, and then overlaying with other relevant data sets, whether it's health related or climate related, and so that can sort of guide, I think, a lot of DOEE's investments, can guide public policy decisions. At the same time, we'll try to summarize, citywide, what these community benefits look like. So, how much money could we be saving the residents in healthcare costs or hospital visits, that kind of thing. Well, let me stop there and see if there's any questions on this initial phase of the slides.
Jamie, when did we roll out the 1.0 plan again? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we rolled out Clean Energy DC, the original plan in 2018. And it's been largely effective in guiding our policy. So we got building energy performance standards, which are sort of a technical standard, but it applies to large buildings, and it really drives them to be a lot more energy efficient. It also increased the amount of renewable energy we get. We have a goal of supplying 100% of our electricity from renewables by 2032, and a few other net zero building energy codes, which I can talk about because that's another technical one. But it's proven a pretty good roadmap for a lot of our decision makers in DC to take a look at and then turn it into policy, whether through legislation or policy programs at agency level, and as our primary greenhouse gas reduction strategy.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I like that you said a lot of this is very technical at times, and distilling it down so that people can be educated, whether they're policymakers or residents, or like that's what's going to drive, because you don't know what you don't know, and then this is really helpful. So I'll let you carry on. Of course, I'll have more questions.
Okay, thank you. So as I said a little bit in responding to Janelle, this is a 5-year plan cycle. So we did our last one in 2018. It's also a good time to update it because there's new binding greenhouse gas reduction targets set for the city and other policies. And then finally, just to align it with other plans, we've had Move DC updates. DOE is about to release a carbon-free DC strategy, which looks at more than just energy. And so just making sure we sort of have one unified district vision. So these are the values that we're prioritizing for Clean Energy DC. We're looking at energy and greenhouse gas emissions, but what do we want this plan to do for us? And I think I really covered all of these in my previous slides, but I put them in here just so you could see them. When I'll share the slides with you, you'll have a record. So buildings and energy, instead of listing out all the things we're considering because it's technical, we have a little sort of infographic that can try to help explain where we want to be. Definitely by 2045, but in the near term, start rolling out some of these programs. So we want a lot more solar on our roofs. So creating incentives, but also making sure that residents can interconnect with Pepco and actually get the solar benefits easily. We want all electric efficient buildings. So there's some stuff on there about electric stoves and water heaters, and this can lower your energy costs, but also improve your air quality because there's no fossil fuel combustion. And then for heating and cooling, switching, a lot of people still have fossil fuel heat, boilers, radiators. I have them in my home. I like them like most people. I also like my gas oven like most people. But looking at how we can get a lot more efficient electric heating into people's home, and we do that through heat pumps. But at the same time, we need to invest in energy efficiency. So, if you don't do it correctly, the heat pumps may not work, their size wrong, or they use a lot of energy. So sometimes that requires better insulation. It's in some cases perhaps new windows or doors, or just air sealing them. So it's sort of a combination of energy efficiency and trying to bring your energy use down, shifting your energy use from gas and fossil fuels to electric, and then powering those with renewables, in this case, solar. At the grid level, which is more on the right, it's the same thing, except we're looking at trying to get more of the energy we import from the grid to be renewable. We want to be able to store this energy in batteries so that when it's not available, or when our energy, electricity is really expensive, when at like 6:30 p.m. when everyone comes home and turns on their air conditioning, we need to turn on entire new power plants to generate the energy we use to power our buildings at those times. So if you have batteries, this mitigates this, and it can save you a lot of money too if you have one in your home. And then finally, dealing with the natural gas infrastructure. As I said, we have 22 years to get rid of our fossil fuel emissions. And so this is going to require us rethinking how we heat our homes and how we deliver that heat to our residents. And one way is geothermal, and there's a number of other ways to do this carbon-free. These are some of the major strategies we'll use, and it's sort of a reiteration. And if you have any questions on these, this is for energy and the grid and the gas transition. So phasing out our fossil fuels and electrifying our buildings, reducing peak demand. Those are those periods when everyone's using energy and they put a lot of stress on the grid. At the same time, E3, modernizing our grid. So we have a grid that has sensors on it. It can communicate, where your power outages are. If you have excess energy in your home, you can send it back to the grid, and these things can happen rather seamlessly. And then finally, increase our renewable energy both locally in DC, which can create jobs and other benefits, but also from Maryland, Virginia, other places where we import energy. So at our building, our home level, it largely follows a similar track. So we want efficient buildings. We want them to be climate resilient. If your power goes out, we want them, to stay hot or cool for 12 hours until your power comes back on. We want them to be all electric. We want all of our new construction to be what we call net zero. And you can really think of that as just a very efficient building that runs on all electric appliances, and then is powered by renewable energy. And finally, and this is sort of an emerging topic, but addressing greenhouse gas emissions that are related to the materials in the building. So Mainly concrete and steel can be very carbon intensive, and so finding low carbon alternatives. And also refrigerants we use for refrigeration are very potent greenhouse gases, and so reducing those are key strategies for us. And then, in the plan, we'll list out specific actions that we'll do to sort of address these or provide incentives so residents or building owners would know, how can we take action? And then I'll move on to the transportation, and we'll open up for discussion again. So the transportation transitions. I think these are largely in line with Move DC goals if you're transportation folks. I know Ward 3 has a number of transportation issues, and it's tracked closely by a lot of the commissioners, I'm sure. But our one of our main goals is to get more people walking and biking. That's essentially a no energy transportation, no emissions. I mean, it's not really, because the food you eat for energy has measurable emissions. If you can't do that, or that doesn't work for a number of reasons, including many good reasons, having good public transit options, and for the public transit, for our buses that often run, can produce a lot of emissions, making them electric. And then finally, once we've reduced the number of vehicles and expanded public transport, ensuring that the vehicles left on the road are electric. And so, this is a big lift. It's figuring out, how do we deal with our curb space? Where do our chargers go? Who owns the chargers? All that kind of thing is something that we're working with, and we'll look at it Clean Energy DC, but DDOT and DOE are also partnering closely on that right now as we look at using federal funding to expand our charging infrastructure. And then another thing we'll be doing that I think does fall under Clean Energy DC is really looking how we can manage our grid with all these electric vehicles. So, if everyone got home and they charge their vehicle at the exact same time, this could put a lot of stress on the grid. So do we need to find economic incentives to shift people charging at in the middle of the night? Do we want to incentivize lighter cars that have smaller batteries and therefore draw less energy? And things like that. So this largely restates a lot of what I said. We want to prioritize walking, biking, public transit. Number two, I didn't talk quite as much about, but align our land use planning with our climate and energy goals. So, that could be parking minimums. It could be density restrictions, transit-oriented development, things we would like to encourage that are usually in the comprehensive plan and more in the Office of Planning wheelhouse, but encouraging it that our policies are aligned and there's not mixed signals out there. Number three, electrify and expand public transit. And four, incentivize electric vehicle and charging infrastructure. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions.
I have a question, if nobody else does, about buildings. When you're presenting your slides, I was just thinking about, at the community and neighborhood level, what this actually looks like. And the building I live in is an apartment building. It's about 100 years old. It'll always be an old building. But, we got new windows that in our day-to-day, you can feel the effects. The air conditioning stays in better than it did in the past. And in the winter, same thing with the heat. But how are projects like that people might experience measured, and are they accounted for? And is there something tangible that, some that we can get behind and communicate to other people that we made this change, and it had some serious effects, or no effect at all if it didn't actually have any effect?
Yeah, that's a good question. And well, I think at the home level, it's often reflected in your energy bills. But if you live in a multifamily building, that might not be the case. And so if it's a large multifamily building, which I think now would be above 50,000 square feet, it has to be energy benchmarked. And so the building owners have to report this data through a portal, and the building gets an Energy Star score. And then again, if it's a large building, it would fall under the regulations of our building energy performance standards. So if it was below the energy threshold, the building would actually be required to make energy upgrades that significantly improved its energy performance, or if not, they would be subject to often heavy fines. And so that's another tool. And so there are these programs, but some buildings don't fall neatly into these categories.
Well, that's a great question, Work. And Jamie, I think, didn't the clean energy also inform the building energy performance standards? That is the policy, the regulations you're referring to right now, with like benchmarking the buildings and then incurring a fine if you don't get up to speed. By the way, we did have Teresa come to one of our committee meetings from the Building Innovation Hub to present on BEPS. So we have that recorded, and we're making our way. It's all connected though, right?
Yeah. The BEPS, it came out of the building energy performance, were a recommendation from the last plan. And and so those are being implemented now, and no one's had to pay a fine yet. We're still trying to help building owners get up to speed and try to figure out how that works and what incentives are available and what support they can have. Which is why we have Teresa to help building owners navigate that.
Exactly. And what they found is, like, I'm also in 100-year-old large multifamily building, is the energy performance, like, without doing anything, is pretty good in those buildings compared to the newer ones, just because of the way that they were built without energy in the beginning. So it's interesting, but the window improvements are obviously needed. But yeah, cool. Oh, the one thing I wanted to bring up on your last slide, you briefly touched on parking minimums and density. What we're in the final throes of here in the Woodley Park and Cleveland Park historic districts is reconciling design guidelines with what was approved in the amendments to the comprehensive plan, which allow for upzoning and additional density on that transit-oriented development idea, where we could potentially put housing above existing retail structure. So that's another bit of, like, this clean energy and all of the other plans that we have to mitigate climate change. The bit of upzoning and advocacy to those nodes, like, is in lockstep with this plan, right? And using mass timber, one of the alternative materials of steel and concrete, would be great for that.
Yeah, and I recently learned that a lot of the carbon in building materials is for underground parking lots.
Yes.
And it's also where a lot of the developer costs are, and so it can be much harder to do affordable housing when you have to build underground parking. And, you know, sometimes in DC, it's a dense area, you need underground parking. And I don't think I don't know, you know, we're not going to try to overrule anything the Office of Planning has done. I think we would just like to call out areas where we think there could be major climate gains with land use stuff. And those were two examples that I threw out. So thank you, Janelle.
Yeah, but adding density over existing transit station is like the easy play.
Yes.
And that's
transit. Okay.
Yeah, trying to do here in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. Cool.
I see we have a hand from Madeline.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Could you speak a little bit more about your considerations of like having charging station in various places in the city, in the sense that not everybody can just have their own charging station at home, and you also mentioned the fact that we don't necessarily want to have everybody charging at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. So maybe some charging during the day or so. I mean, I know that electric cars have many other problems, but is there any considerations of having charging stations placed strategically throughout the cities to encourage that?
Yeah, there is. And right now, you know, my agency and DDOT are working on rolling out a number of charging infrastructure programs. So some will be public chargers on some of the, I think, the main thoroughfares coming in and out of DC, but also looking at where we can use public spaces. So like if there's a library that has a parking lot, can we use public parking spaces to host these chargers that community members could use, you know, when they get home, and also finding incentives for multifamily building owners, you know, working with the utility, that they would have an incentive to financial incentive from the utility to do a lot of the work. So I think there's a lot of stuff being done. I will say there's still a lot of, you know, questions on how to do this and how, you know, where these chargers belong. You know, anyway, a number of questions still have to be worked out on our electric charging strategy.
Thank you.
Well, just before council went into recess, council member Charles Allen's transportation committee did have a pretty lengthy hearing with DDOT, DOE, and DOEE. I feel like there's an extra E in there, but about this, and it's way more complicated. It's very complicated. And there's a number of cities that are like ours that are doing pilot programs to test out different models. And there's the potential to learn from the first mouse to the trap, getting the cheese, and we might want to be the second. So, but definitely more to come on that. It's a really good question. And listening to that hearing, I knew it was complicated, but wow, it's a lot.
Janelle, is there a recording of that meeting?
I don't remember if council records their committee meetings or not, but I'm sure Charles's or council member Allen's folks have like at least a readout or notes on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll look for it and see if I can find it and send it to you, because it was really interesting.
Okay, thanks. I have a neighbor who's very interested in that, so I'd like to share that with her. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I can keep going then take any final questions. I don't have much left. Here's a timeline that might need to be updated, but we're planning on having a more detailed draft later this fall that will have some of the more specific policies that I didn't get into today. And so there'll be an opportunity to review that, and we'll seek public feedback. And then we hope to publish a complete version, or at least start to have it reviewed internally and designed in early 2024. This is just a sampling of some programs we have, and I listed out some of the low income ones because they're equity and environmental justice specific. But there are a lot of programs out there that are either run by DOE or federal tax incentives. Whether you're trying to make your house more efficient or install new appliances or buy an electric vehicle, there's a lot more incentives now than there used to. We have a very strong solar incentive in DC. And so, residents, as I mentioned, that have a roof, it's a great deal. It can even be a good deal for your building if they have the space. And then finally at the bottom, there are some other incentive programs that are just for sort of affordable housing and properties that serve low-income communities. So it could be a shelter or a clinic. So maybe low-income residents don't live there, but it provides a key community service. There's a number of good programs that provide either grant funding or very low interest funding to these communities. And if you have any questions about any of this, I'm happy to talk to you or connect you with the right folks in my agency. And then just the final slide. This is my contact information. If you'd like, I can share this presentation with you. We have a website. You can sign up for our newsletter where we post updates on this, or see the latest updates on there. You can also provide feedback if there's some policies you think we need to consider. You can add those in there, or just email me. So with that, thank you, and happy to take any final questions.
Great, thank you very much, Jamie. Are there any other questions?
Jamie, it would be great if we could get the copy of the presentation, because we'll post it to our site too as another, we now have a resources page.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be super helpful.
Besides like promoting when there's a period for public comment and stuff, what are some other ways that we can get involved at our hyper-local level to support this work?
Well, I think you can help us communicate some of our incentive programs, particularly new ones that get rolled out in tax incentives. I think a lot of residents may not know that there's these new Inflation Reduction Act tax credits that can help you buy new mechanical equipment or give you a big tax break if you work in your home. So I can see if there's a list of those. I could share those things. And then, once we have the plan done, and if you guys support it, I think your support would help us moving it forward and making sure it gets adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure there'll be some opposition from certain industries or different groups.
Yeah, Jamie, with like the amount of resources and like incentives and programs, I especially like the one, the Solar Works one, where we're upskilling folks to get into the industry, because a lot of the problem the industry is finding is that we don't have folks to do the service on some of these new pieces of equipment we're putting out. So it just makes sense. Like the easier it is to promote programs like that within communities, whether Ward 3, Ward 8, Ward 7, like it just providing that to folks like us and other community leaders and not making it be like a deep dive down the website to the left, to the right, click here, and then do, I don't even know, like it helps everyone. If I'm not saying this is you personally, because I know it's not you personally doing this, but you know, just having that work stream be a little easier. And even with these other incentive programs, like my building, trying to figure out if it's more beneficial for us to fix whatever gas leak problems we have versus electrify the building, right? Like chasing down the different programs is very complicated, which is a bit of why it helps to know the folks over at the Building Innovation Hub, because I know that they can help, but not everybody has me living in their building, right? So like flow trees that just like make it easier, like as part of the plan, as part of like the ask for funding this plan, it should be something that also funds an easier like community education engagement level.
Okay. That's really good feedback. Thank you, Janelle.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I mean, this is a bit how this came up because I knew it was in the works and work wants to promote this and educate. So it's helps everyone in the end, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think we can do a better job of communicating all the programs we have, you know, through our website and a clean website, but also in flyers and other ways that get to residents that don't check the DOE website regularly. So I don't know, the 700 some thousand Washingtonians, being able to find a way to communicate with them and have them adopt these solutions, I think is going to be pretty critical to achieving our goals on the timeline we want, or not achieving our goals and missing that timeline. Because even if we have good programs that we can't roll them out and get customer adoption, it's you know, we're not gonna get there.
Yeah. I mean, and the other challenging thing that we've experienced, like half of our ANC are large multifamily buildings. The other half are single family homes. So a lot of times agencies and everybody will notice the single family homes individually, but just send one flyer, like one door knocker to the big buildings because they can't get into the big buildings to flyer them, right? So this becomes a challenge where if it's basically up to building management to put it on a building listserv to do. So there needs to be like a better solution to because that's a lot of people, right? And that's a captive audience because usually the residents of multifamily will work together. Like we have a whole composting program before it was like years ago in my building. So there's a there that's a bit lost too. Others have heard other agencies have heard me complain about this.
So it's communicating better with is it the multifamily residents?
I think the multifamily residents would also be able to like push their building management or condo associations or, you know, drive the change if it's needed or if it's right. Or just know about the change that's happening in the larger District of Columbia. So and that's a bit on the ANCs too, but it's hard for us to walk into, you know, the building next door on a regular basis and just drop flyers everywhere.
Yeah. We can mail them. I mean, we do mailings. We can do direct mailings to multifamily.
That's also kind of a waste. Kind of get just one
Well,
you in the laundry room. I don't know. There's a balance here.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's a very good point. And it's a good point too about the balance between single family homes and multifamily homes, and also renters and owners. You know, I know a lot of renters that are really want to take action, and sometimes it can be hard to empower them. And so it's figuring out, I think, how to communicate and provide resources, you know, at a minimum, a list of the resources available to the different groups.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. In my S&D is all apartment buildings, many renters. We also have co-ops and condos and everything. That's, people want to get
Okay.
in, yeah, like you just said, it's hard to empower them.
Yeah, and Adam Prinzo, who's another commissioner and the lower part of Woodley Park, all of his area is also multifamily.
Okay, great. Anybody else have anything you'd like to ask or contribute? Any general comments? If not, then I suggest we wrap up the meeting. Jamie, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us this evening, and for sharing this valuable information. So I guess that's it. Janelle, anything else from your side?
No, thank you again. And yeah, definitely keep us posted in the progress. Happy to contribute.
Okay, we'll make sure to keep you guys updated, and thank you for your time and for inviting us. And if you have any questions about this or anything related that might be related to my work, you know, please just shoot me an email or give me a call.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.